ALTBAYS Show is live. This is show number 187. Kia ora, Etefano. It's good to see you all. If you are watching us right now, it's because you are on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to our channel. If you are not watching it live, maybe you are listening to us, which is great. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the leading audio platforms. So you can also subscribe to those platforms, and it does support the team. Okay, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, ALTBAYS, ALTBAYS. The platforms are growing. More people get to know what we're doing, which is pretty cool. So if you would like to recommend someone, if you think that we should be talking to some people that you find that it would be great to this show, yeah, let us know. We love recommendations. Our media group is also publishing this beautiful thing here. Look at this cover, man. Wow. The Coramind magazine. Oh, I know what it is. Vaughan is the data on your phone, man, that I forgot to ask you. There, he's onto it, man. He's quick. He's already onto it. The Coramind magazine is published by the Flock Media Group. We always invite local artists to be on the cover. And this month we have Lara Gay. She is French and she lives in Whangamata. She's super talented. She's coming to our show on the 30th to tell some stories and to talk a little bit more about her beautiful artwork. You will find the Coramind magazine in the whole Coromandel Peninsula, and if you are anywhere in the world, you can read the online version. Of course, we also have an audio version because, you know, accessibility, inclusivity matters. So make sure to check us out, coramind.nz. On my left, Elvisa, kia ora.
Kia ora.
How's it going?
Good, yeah. Thanks for having me on again. That's very kind of you.
Thank you for joining us. Such a pleasure to have you for good korero.
Yes, it is.
Getting enough sleep lately?
I have a 6-month-old, so not really.
Not really, eh?
But I have the privilege of working from home and having family support within the home, living with my in-laws, so I do get to have the odd nap.
How is this, like, how do you see the way that our society is when so many parents both have to work, like this thing with like 2 incomes and having kids? Like, how is that?
Bro, like, I have no idea. That's why I moved in with my in-laws, because I was like, bro, this is too hard. Like, help. I've seen in a lot of like Facebook groups that a lot of parents are struggling, especially when you have one parent trying to be a stay-at-home parent financially. It is almost impossible these days, and so a lot of stay-at-home parents are trying to do a side hustle, trying to start like a small business of some sort. So I'm seeing a lot of that online, a lot of parents reaching out for tips, tricks on how to get ahead while still raising a family, because it's really unfair to think that, not just unfair but unnatural also, to just be able to have a family if you are of a wealthy background. It's not good for anyone. So there's a lot of that going on, sort of under the surface a little bit. It's just the times that we're living in at the moment. But I feel very privileged and very lucky to have whānau, both my parents and my husband's parents, who are always really keen to help, and they would open their doors and let us come and live with them and help us raise our child, because it takes a village to raise a child, literally. Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora. We have the pleasure to have Vaughan WINIATA here with us. Kia ora, my bro.
Oh, kia ora, kia ora. You know, thank you for having me here. I don't know why you've invited an old fart on the show, but I'll try and do my best.
That was a cool thing, because I think there was something with the content that we were sharing. You got the Treaty Partners, which is a great page. And you have beautiful contacts in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You've done a lot. So it was actually a big privilege for me when you said that you were keen to come to the Coromandel. Thank you so much.
No, I'm honestly privileged to be here.
Looking beautiful. Look at that shirt, my man.
Yeah, you know, and I have to give a shout out for this shirt. It's not just random. You know, this is Hori, an artist from Otaki, Hohepa Thompson. And yeah, so honestly, I love wearing his stuff. It's just spot on. So yeah, that's bro, he can send me an invoice or I'll send him one.
I think we should
free
get
shirts.
Oh, sounds good. We should get him on the show. That would be easier, right?
You should do. Yeah,
Totally.
Awesome.
Cool. Let's do that. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you to plant-based, lot of love food, lot of love. Tanya, beautiful dinner. She brought us amazing kai. I posted a story on our Instagram. How was that food?
It was masarap, which is delicious in Tagalog.
Masarap. Beautiful. Next time, carnivore diet, I will remember Vaughan.
No, that cauliflower curry was just sensational. Yeah,
nice.
Beautiful.
So for the people in the Coromandel, if you are after some cooking classes or if you want some plant-based treats, make sure to check Tanya's lotoflove.co.nz. Amazing plant-based food, plant-based kai. I'm getting plant food. And I also want to say a big thank you to Peninsula Motel for supporting this show. How's the room, my bro? All good?
Awesome.
Tidy?
Awesome. Yep. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah.
Nice. Peninsula Motel, 93 Albert Street. Make sure to check them out. If you go on Google Peninsula Motel, they come right at the... Actually, motels in Whitianga, they come right at the top. Fred is a top guy. Always very supportive with our shows, making sure that our guests are relaxed and have a good place to rest after coming to the ALTBAYS Show. So shout out Peninsula Motel. We're in this together. My man, I have something here for our audience, if you don't mind reading a little bit about you, excuse moi. Vaughan has a successful professional and commercial track record that includes a corporate career and business ownership. When he sold his business, he decided to focus on the advisory, is that the word?
Advisory, yeah.
Advisory and mentoring of small businesses, which is amazing. Recently, he has moved into the area of corrections and the reintegration of prisoners post-conviction. Vaughan considers himself a provocative social commentator, fiercely committed to being non-negotiable in terms of robust personal values and principles. I like that. He's not afraid to call people out in this regard. Vaughan WINIATA is a proud Maori and a proud father of 2 sons. He's deeply concerned about the direction we appear to be headed. That said, he's optimistic about our future as inhabitants of the best part of the planet Earth and looks forward to doing his bit to make it an even better place. Kia ora, my bro.
Hey, kia ora. Yeah.
Hey, you've done a lot in life.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot more. But, I think that in terms of what you read there, if you met Vaughan WINIATA as a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50 and now 60, if you met me 20 years ago, you'd probably think, what an asshole, because that corporate career that I had, I was a different guy that's sitting here today. And, I know that we've all heard it before. I think it was on a Joe Rogan show once, but there was a Confucius quote that goes something like, we're born with 2 lives, and the second one begins when we realize we only have one. That when you read that out, there's 2 lives in me, and so the me that's sitting here, I think I'm in the second one. and it's that point where you look at it and go, actually, we're not here for a long time. And so therefore you've sort of had this volume part of your life. Now what's the value part? And the discovery of being, proudly Maori, but the truth is brought up on a Western leg. And so now delving into that world and realizing that the diamonds are right under our nose, but didn't see them, up until probably 10 years ago.
Do you think because of your background, was that like a motivator to get involved with businesses and play with money and play with power? Yeah,
the motivator was shit happens, right? So we had a very successful family business and it had to be sold, marriage ends. And so therefore something that probably isn't the best thing to happen in your life opens up one door sort of, shuts but windows open. And so I think that the thing in terms of believing in the universe where you go, wow, it didn't feel great at the time, but well, here we are. So therefore that journey. And so I went from someone who was running a business to being a one-man band, but I was really interested in the one-to-one relationship and really getting involved with people, getting to know them, versus just selling widgets for a living. Yeah.
Right. And you also, we talked about that just before the show, that there was a time in your life that you were focusing on Maori businesses.
Well, that and until quite recently, it's had the opportunity through a business relationship to work with Maori businesses. And so, in terms of, I was always asking myself the question, what is a Māori business? In terms of, we know what a business is, it's a balance sheet, the P&L and all that sort of stuff, but what is the difference between a Māori a business and anything else? And the truth is, there's not one type, there's many different types, just like as in any business. But that sort of journey was something that I needed to see, and I think that the key thing is that Māori, we take a lot of satisfaction out of giving back to our own. So generally what you'll find in a Māori business, they're employing people from their own family, from their own community. That's a big thing to be able to do. There's a lot of pride in being able to do that, and that's something that, no disrespect to a non-Māori business, but that's really something that was a common denominator.
That's an interesting one, because a lot of people will say, don't mix business and family and relationships and all that stuff, right? Like, you got to be careful when you're doing those, when you're putting those things together. Coming as an advisor, do you pay attention to that? Of like, are you sure you want to involve your family, or like that's not up to you?
Well, that is a really good point to recognise, because I think that before, we were before Māori were playing in the big economy, the game. We talk about the Māori economy, but we're all in the same monopoly game. It's just doing the same thing. A business was, you went somewhere, you came home at night, you ate dinner, you went back, right? Māori businesses don't work like that way. There's a blurred line between what I'm doing here and my whānau. And so in terms of not blurring that line, we do. We do big time. So I think that it's something that is one of the key things about a Māori business, is that family are right there at your left and right shoulder.
I have some questions about that, because, I mean, a lot of people might look at, from a Western perspective, if you're talking about a big, big company, if you employ people that you know, it's often called nepotism. But within Māori, it's a cultural thing, and it's a looking after your own kind of mentality and making sure that you, I mean, can you expand on that, the differences between nepotism and a Māori sort of structure for a business? Yeah,
and I think in terms of nepotism, if we want to look at it in sort of te ao Māori, in the Māori world, or in the non, it's always been there, right? As far as the prodigal son and sort of like keeping things within a circle. And look, whether it's a Jewish community or Croatian or wherever you go, we trust our own. That's what we do. It's blood. But I think that in terms of expanding on that, there's many things that I see in Māori culture that are actually no different than any other cultures, just with different words or different ways of going about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why, if we look at, we talked about it offline, about the Irish, the Scottish, the Croatians, when they came to New Zealand, they integrated very seamlessly with Māori, because actually they arrived here and they didn't want anything. They wanted to start again. They were different to the bunch that sort of arrived around 1800 that actually thought, hey, here's a country we can take. Sort of thing. That's not, and I think that, no disrespect to those that came early, but there is a difference between a colonizer and a settler. Or an immigrant,
I think that's really important to articulate as well. That second wave you were talking about, a settler as opposed to a colonizer, and the different attitudes and behaviours and integration into society. And I think I mentioned before we started, my mum is from Scottish heritage, and they are dour and cautious and suspicious and that, but there was so much about the way that she looked at things that just could be Māori. It was the same thing. And so that's why I think that the integration was completely understandable. And that's why we've got to celebrate that in terms of World's Meeting. Because from a Māori perspective, of course, we've got this wonderful culture and beautiful culture. We've got to understand that we didn't get this far 183 years from signing off Te Tiriti on our own. There were other really good people involved in that journey.
Do you guys feel like that there's still a little bit of trauma or misunderstanding? I ask that because, for example, in Brazil, we had a huge movement with slavery, right?
Yeah.
I like to say this data because, like this numbers because they're super relevant. 40% of all slaves that came from Africa went to Brazil. So that makes a lot of our culture. We also had, like, if you look at Brazil, there's a big population of Japanese, a big population of Italians that came in that post-war. They were also going through a lot of shit, but they came in different circumstances, right? So nowadays, we hear the black community saying, oh, of course, you know, like, you didn't come in the best of the circumstances, but it was way better than being a slave, you know, like you were welcomed. You were like an European coming to a country that needed work, and you guys got a lot given, you know, a lot of opportunities that the people who were actually suffering. And when the slaves were abolished, slavery was abolished, they got fuck all, you know, like there was nothing for them. So there's no, I won't say that there's hate. Maybe people who don't understand history, they might have a little bit of like a beef there. Resentment, thank you. But you understand what was happening historically. If you are ignorant about history, you won't understand that. Is it something that you guys can see in New Zealand? A bit of misunderstanding or like not being clear? That's like maybe the Maori community has some like, they say Europeans instead of understanding that there were English colonizers and there were people, as you're saying, coming to try to do something different with the country.
Well, you know, you've done it now, bro, because it's all going to get political.
It's like, that's right.
That's why we're here for. That's why we're here for.
Yeah, no, you pick the scab off now, man. But you know, the bottom line is absolutely yes. The trauma, the chip on the Maori shoulder it's bigger than the Grand Canyon. It's bigger than the gap that's behind me that I drove up from Auckland today, is real in terms of why are 60% of the inmates in prisons Maori? Why are the reoffending and that so high? Pretty much every object that KPI, the Maori, we perform poorly, and that absolutely has to do with how this country was set up, which was no different. I guess the thing is with Maori is what we will say is the colonizer tried to conquer us. They failed. We're still here 183 years later. It's not great, but we are still here. So as much as they would have liked to have rinsed our DNA out of society, it's here and it's going to be here in another 2,000 years. But I guess the key question is, how do we make this work? You know, it's like there's no point, saying, well, okay, thank you, James Cook, for bringing syphilis to New Zealand. We really thank you for colonising us in this way. But it's like, no, we do have to let that stuff go. And so we're in 2023 today. And, another thing we touched on offline is just a lack of vision about what New Zealand looks like in 20 years and 40 years and 60 years. You ain't hearing it out of anyone in Wellington. Not at all. And I worry about that because I've got a 20 and a 24-year-old son. And I think, what picture do they see? What picture? And right now, if you listen to that lot down there, they don't care about tax cuts or subsidies or whatever. They actually want a place that they're proud to call their own. And I think that we're at risk of losing that.
When you say they, who are you talking about? Sorry, I misunderstood.
That last bit. In terms of losing.
Yeah. Are you talking about the politicians? Or
No. So they, the politicians, there's 120 of them down in Wellington, right? If you met them all and you think, you're running the country? So they is the rest of us.
Okay.
So,
right, yes.
Yeah, so it's the team of 5 mil minus 120 politicians. Sort of. Because it's like, if you talk politics, right, it's still that old ingrained left versus right. If you're on the left, you must be sort of like come from bloodlines of communists and socialists. And if you're on the right sort of thing, you're some sort of privilege. It's not. It's the top and the bottom. It's the haves and the have-nots. The left and right's gone. We've seen this wealth divide open up right in front of our eyes. So on our watch, we're not leaving this place in good shape. And that's the bit that concerns me, is what point do we step in and goes enough? We don't want a civil war. But I believe that if we don't do something in our lifetime, we're going to see that sort of disruption. Where not quite like Thatcherism, but you'll have a group of young people going through and going, those ones that went before us, they've actually screwed it up.
They're doing that now.
Yeah.
Gen Z are so like, what's it called? Not they're apathetic because they're just like, what's the point? I don't have a future. I'm not going to be able to own a house. I shouldn't have kids because of climate change, and I'm going to give them a crappy future. You know, like they can't see a future for themselves. Okay, not all of them are like that, but a lot.
Yeah.
Especially when you see online, their activity online.
Yeah.
They're aware of how crappy things are.
Yeah.
And they're starting to, you know, make decisions that are quite sad, actually, in terms of deciding not to have kids because of whatever. For me personally, I feel like children give us hope. They are the reason why we work hard in the spaces that we work. But yeah, unfortunately, I agree. Like, it is really hard to sort of think of how politicians do think short term. And a lot of the time they get sucked into that politicking mindset where we need to get back into government, so we're going to appease, you know, a certain... the voters. Who are our voters, and how can we get more people to vote for us? How can we take voters from another party and appease them kind of mentality? I will say that I've met a few genuine politicians. I've been friends with a few of them, and I'm friends with them because they share the same kaupapa and values that I do, but I also understand how difficult it is to change that within that system. Yeah.
Can I ask you guys one thing? That's the beautiful thing about hosting a show. I get to invite these beautiful people so I can get educated as well. We hear a lot about co-governance, right? So correct me if I'm wrong. It's a way to respect the way that Maori would deal with things, like giving a voice, because that was in the treaty.
Yeah.
Okay, you both please give me better words for that. But my question is, if we can see that the system that we are operating now, it's actually not that great, why the fuck would Maori would want to be part of that? Wouldn't it be easier? Look at me. Wow, this is shit. Don't call me on that.
We're going to war.
But you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, is it the, because I'm all up for whatever the Maori want to do, because it was, if I understand right, it was in the treaty of like, you guys have something, but we all, that's us, man. Like, does it make sense to want to do co-governance? Wouldn't be easier, like, to try to change the structure of the thing? Like, oh man, too much. But you guys can probably
I'll just chip in quickly, and I think that there's one thing that this government has to wear, is that they bungled the interpretation of what co-governance really meant. And so in terms of the three waters thing, most people, it went over the top of their heads, right? But if co-governance was done properly, you know, we project ourselves to the rest of the world as this clean, green, amazing. That is bullshit. In New Zealand, clean, green is oversell. Most of our streams and rivers are full of cow shit. If co-governance existed, that would not be the case. You know, our lakes have been treated as sewer ponds. Thank you very much, colonisation. Now, that's rough, but my point is that co-governance would have stopped that. So in terms of... Way back when, yeah. But that never would have happened, because a local council meeting in a town like Levin, do you think there would have been a Māori at the table? I doubt it very much. So we've kind of got here not by accident. You know, we've spent 183 years of perfecting this flawed model. And so I think that what you've touched on there in terms of co-governance, still, people think it's something like, oh, Māori are getting everything, they're taking over everything. But just to put this into context, you know, about $2.5 billion have been paid out as treaty claims since the Waitangi Tribunal 1975. Confiscated lands, if you put it on market value today, 4.2 trillion. So my message to New Zealand is, you're getting a good deal, a real good deal. This is like better than beads and blankets, you know. So let's not, and so, but you know, no disrespect to people, they just don't know. They don't know, because
for added context on top of that, is land that historically, like only like up to 20 years ago or so, that was given back to Māori, saying like, oh, okay, we're going to start giving your land back. A lot of it was like, what are they going to do with it kind of land? You know, like it was unproductive, wasn't economical kind of land. So it was very disingenuous, a lot of those efforts, you know, to try and say like, well, yeah, we're going to start this process. It wasn't fair, and it was very, it was like, disingenuous, those.
Okay. How would that work then? Like,
Yeah, so what I said about how do we make this work, and I think that chip on our shoulder that Māori do actually have to start going, well, you fellas in Wellington haven't got any bright ideas, we do have to be forthcoming. And I think that what we've seen in the last few weeks with what's going down in Wellington with Meka crossing the floor to Māori Party, I think there's a general, I'm not supportive of the way that's being done, it's a bit ugly, but I get it, the frustration is, well, we have to do something. And I think if you truly want to be an effective Māori MP in Wellington, you're probably best off with Māori Party. It's not going to happen in national. Their constitution will not allow a Māori to be a Māori. And probably Labour the same. So we need to see places where that is the kaupapa of the party.
The Green Party also have Te Tiriti as part of their constitution.
Yeah.
They're the only other non-Māori party that include Te Tiriti as.
Well, actually, that's a really good point you bring up. It's the parties that have Te Tiriti as we will honour it, because it's all very well to say we recognise Te Tiriti, but that's like saying I can see a camera over there, right? It's not saying I'm interested in it. Right. You need those words. We will honour Te Tiriti. It's top party, it's Green Party, Māori Party. I think Labour have something close that says we will endeavour to honour. It's not quite saying we will. Yeah, so it just
we'll talk about it.
It's got an out clause, right? But in terms of that, how do we make it work? That chip that we have to get off our shoulder. We just recently had Anzac Day, and I had a friend that did not realise that when soldiers went away to war, when they came back, they were given the opportunity to have like resettlement parcels of land. They could apply for it as an ex-serviceman. Excluded Māori. Right? So Māori battalion went over, they come back, they get a cheque, they go down the pub and drink it, right? And so there's farmers today that inherited or were gifted land. Now, the point is that this is not in any history book. This is stuff that's just there. So that trauma is in so many ways that it's kind of disguised very, very well. But, this is... Like we're not hearing a beat up on the government. What we hear is saying, well, 183 years down the track.
History lesson.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because the history lessons that were delivered when I was at school, I know everything about India, about Brazil. We didn't learn about here. We didn't learn about the land wars or anything like that. It's changed now, but yeah.
Can you tell me one thing on a couple of things that when you found out, when you were doing your research and reading about history, you were like, really? Did we get that screwed over that much? Like, were there things that you were very surprised that you were not aware of from like your school time or like universities?
Yeah, but I think because what happened was when I had time on my hands, when the business was on 2017, I went on the spree around second-hand bookshops and just started buying Kiwi history books and reading stuff, particularly land wars and stuff like that. And I was old enough to keep my anger under my feet. But then look at it and go, well, here we are. So how do I take those learnings? And I think the beautiful thing is that we are young enough to go, this ain't heading in the right direction, but what do we do about it? And I think what you've said is that is the challenge. What do we do about it? Because there's nothing coming out of Wellington that is going to be a solution. So what happens is we go to the polls in October 15, I think is when the election is. People will probably vote for change. They will go, oh, we've had 6 years of this crowd. Let's choose the other guys. And the pendulum is going to swing back very hard against Māori and poor. Not just Māori, but anyone that's that top and bottom I talk about. So we've just had this crap in the last couple of weeks of, the top 311 wealthy in New Zealand paying half the tax of everyone else. We're not in Venezuela, man. It's like we can be better than that, and so we need a fairer system. And that's why I said to you about top. I love their flat tax and that, yeah.
Are you open to talk about politicians or parties that you feel like are coming up with good ideas without saying, hey, I'm going to vote for these guys, but like, can you see some actual good ideas out there? Like people putting themselves as, I know what I'm doing.
Do you want to start? Because I definitely have an opinion on the current situation. It's not great,
Okay.
but it's.
Yeah, I mean, I was asked by a couple of different parties if I'd be interested, because of my local government experience, if I'd be interested in standing for certain parties. It's not my time in my life at the moment, but it's something that I might think about in the future, especially after working in the environmental space. and trying to learn and understand more about the political climate, and also certain areas that really need good people in certain roles. Certain people in politics, sometimes they shouldn't be in those roles, and it's they're very powerful positions. And we're seeing that within, I call it political tabloids, all the private stuff that goes on from politicians from a private life perspective. I just think that we need good people in those leadership roles who are educated, empathetic, understanding, continue to research. Like, just because you know something doesn't mean that that's the continuous truth. The climate's always changing, people are always changing, society and wealth and inequality is always changing. So I always look to the parties that are always empathetic towards the minorities and people who have never had a voice and historically never had a voice, who look at data, who look at what kind of future do we want for Aotearoa New Zealand? Those sorts of perspectives and kōrero, not just money. This is not economical. Like, money is made up. It's just figures in the we've made this system up. People are real. People's lives and livelihoods and quality of life and culture and sense of identity, that doesn't, that's inherent. That's something that we live with every single day. Money and our quality of life can change in an instant. Mine did. It changed overnight, essentially. So, just that kind of holistic thinking and not just focusing on the numbers, because, And
it's and so I've got a 24 and a 20-year-old son, and I'll often say to them, we've got an election coming up in October, what are you going to do? And, I feel guilty that their options are so poor. But if we want to look at it, and within 150 days or less now, we're going to be voting, and we've got two major parties, National and ACT, and then we've got some minors. So whether it's Green, Te Pāti Māori, ACT, the smartest party that appeals to 30 to 18, top, hands down, right? And I voted Māori Party National most of my life. National, write them off. And the reason why I write them off, they don't have a Māori bone in their body, so that's me. I don't represent all of New Zealand. I represent 17% of the population. And if you are Māori, you really need to keep a coalition that will be Labour, Green and Te Pāti Māori, and probably top if they get the opportunity. I think that they would swing left. And the reason is, sure, their outcomes have actually been not great, but they've tried. They actually have tried. I can tell you right now, if there is an Act National for Māori, there will be no trying. The checkbook will be shut, and it will be see you in 6 years when maybe we think debt's back down. But you know what? All that 311 families, their wealth would have doubled, in that 6 years. So that's not the New Zealand I want. So loyalty to parties has gone out the window, and it's looking at if we wake up on the 16th of October and it's a National Act coalition, it's a bit of a disaster for about 80% of the New Zealand population.
Right. But what I see is that in the news, it's always like, the economy, taxes, inflation. And for the person who has no clue about money or how things work, I feel like it's kind of like a thing of like, National will sort that out. National will sort that out because they know about money, because they know about economy. No, you don't know if they do know. You just worried about everything that they're saying, that the country is having an issue with money, and then you think that the rights will deal better with money. Yeah. And it's not how things work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in terms of like we go on about national debt, our national debt is irrelevant. In the OECD, we're doing pretty bloody well, and we have a balance sheet to take on more debt, and we have to take on more debt if we want to get ourselves out of the hole that we're in. But we're in an election year, and there are footballs that are chosen to get votes, and I think a really good one is crime. And David Seymour saying, there's a reduction in the prison population and crime in the community's gone up. I can tell you right now, how much time has David Seymour spent inside prisons and meeting prisoners? jack shit.
And
right?
there's a law
And
that MPs
so-
can go into prisons, isn't there?
Yeah, well, yeah, and so
Yeah.
so he's like having
Really?
someone
There's a
give-
law for that.
Yeah, so I don't want this like show pony saying things to get votes, right? I want someone that knows what they're talking about. And when it comes to crime, he knows zero, absolutely zero. So don't do that to us. We're not that dumb, and that's the problem. There's 120 down there in Wellington coming up with this messaging they feed out onto social media, and look. I'll give David Seymour credit. He's a hard-working MP. He's just not my MP. That's all. Well, I'm wrong. He's Epsom electorate. I'm Epsom electorate. But yeah, I won't be voting for that dude. You can't. Any Māori, that looks in the mirror and sees themselves Māori won't be voting for David Seymour. End of story. There's not many in Epsom, by the way.
Man, great. I'm glad you touched on the crime topic because. When I came to New Zealand 10 years ago, one of the coolest things for me to tell my friends and my family overseas was like, if you grab the newspaper in New Zealand and you twist it, it won't drip blood. Because that's what happens in Brazil. Just by picking the newspaper, it's already like, oh, shit, there's so much blood here. And in New Zealand, it was not like that. It was like, oh, cool, cats went up the tree and the firefighters got it down. Yay, New Zealand. Go. I'm exaggerating. But, I can see that as years went by, there's more going on. I understand when people say, oh, but it's because now we have TikTok and everybody's got a camera and everybody is recording the crimes and the ram raids. 10 years ago, we didn't have that. And I'm like, yes, but I still think that people are struggling because we chat with people, we have friends who are struggling to feed their families, or we have friends who are raising kids and they're telling me that they're lucky that they have their parents to help and I would not expect that in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Yeah. So what's your take on that? Because you mentioned people who are saying things that actually don't reflect on the situation, and working in prisons, I think you get to understand a little bit more of what's going on.
Well,
Vaughan.
but you touched on technology, right? Today we look at a device and that kind of rules our world. But that doesn't worry me. ChatGPT's taking a lot, or should I say, the whole AI thing. But the reality is technology will just march on anyway. So in terms of humans literally being an advanced breed of monkeys, life goes on. And, when I was born, a doctor slapped my ass and I cried, sort of thing, and I was alive. Now they're going to jack a chip in there, in that little bunghole, and they're going to know where I am or whatever. So it's kind of like, okay, we're evolving, and I think it's up to us as people that would consider senior to read the play and not try and resist progress. This is like just make good decisions, and not be for sale is something. And I think this is the problem with politics, is, when that a politician has met someone that's come in from Israel and prepared to put, a couple of million into their campaign for the election year, which has happened. And the leader of the party sits there, obedient, and the person leaves town on his Learjet but buys a nice place in Queenstown at the same time. That shit's real. And that's not our world, right? But it's not good enough for me. That's not the country that's going to happen on our watch. So coming back to what we do about it, I think for me, my eye-opener is looking at my boys when they are 40, 50, 60, what will they be doing? They certainly won't be doing podcasts, right? That'll be something different by that time. But they're going to be talking about this period we're in right now. And I think that New Zealand is one of those countries that, do we sell it down the river or do we go, nah, enough's enough? And that's my view on it. So what does enough look like? The vision. What's the vision for our country? And whether you listen to any leader of any political party, I'm not hearing it. Not hearing it at all.
Do you guys think that that classic saying, oh, we gotta be tough on crime, we gotta go after those criminals, like, is that a good answer for what's going on?
Well, it's a good answer if that death penalty is the way that you keep the streets clean. It's great. But that's not real. We have to stick them in factories. They're big storage warehouses. We stick our prisoners in factories. There's 8,300 in them here at the moment. And they'll be bulging at the seams. And so I think that this is a really good thing about us being an advanced breed of monkeys. How do we move to the next step about rehabilitation? And I think that, in terms of values of a society, what are the signs of a good society? That if unconditional love is a real thing, if someone fucks up, you actually believe that they still can have a life, right? Rather than you've got this mark on your forehead and you're no good for finance or getting an apartment or insurance or whatever. And that's the problem that we have right now. You've been inside and you're going to pay for the rest of your life.
I think there is a, what's the word? It's escaping my brain, but, like the different levels of offence or different types of offence. If you've got someone who is violent and who is almost unrehabilitatable, is that a word?
Good. Yeah. If it's not, sounded great.
Thank you. Yeah, someone who is so deeply traumatized, so troubled that they cannot be re-released into the public for the safety of others, then I think that should be like there's an assessment. So, there should be an assessment process. Sure, give them a second chance in terms of rehabilitation opportunities. Yeah. But for someone who's had like marijuana on them and then they're thrown in prison for having a bit of dried plant on them and that ruins the rest of their life, I'm sure if you gave them the option of rehabilitation, chances are they probably won't offend in that way again. I was going to say in that way, but I mean like again, because they've had that opportunity of like, I've learnt my lesson, let's not do that again. I want to have a life. It's that second life thing, eh?
Yeah. And the thing about that is we're going down another rabbit hole now because you've only got to turn up to Auckland District Court on a Monday morning because they've got all the weekends charges and crap like that. And there'll be a whole lot of brown people sitting there to go into the courtroom and find out what their situation is. And there'll be a couple of, dare I say it, white people. Daddy will be there. King's Counsel lawyer will be there. And little Johnny's caused all sorts of mayhem and shit over the weekend. He walks out of there, name suppression. He goes home. Our justice system can be bought. That is a major problem in this country. So therefore, if you are privileged, you ain't going to jail, man. You ain't going to jail. You're going to maybe, at worst, have a bracelet at home in your multi-million-dollar house eating ice cream. While brown boy, court lawyer says, look, if I was you, I'd plead guilty. Off you go, inside. And that is just the real world.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like I said earlier, what people are starting to realise is that a justice system that depends on fines to reduce people offending in a particular way, say, like warrant offence, rego, parking fines, all that stuff. If someone is too poor to pay for that stuff and then they get a fine slapped on top of that and then they get more fines, instead of providing some sort of assistance so that they can cover their expenses, fines are a poor people's problem. If you've got enough money, you can offend as much as you want because you're covering your fines. Which reminds me, I've got a parking ticket I need to pay for.
Well, and at that point, I've got to jump in terms of, because it's all about Maori and all about me. And I think that that Maori have to be more forthcoming about, because when you end up in court, no disrespect to judges, but they ain't human. That's another world they live in, right? They're not with us down here on the street. And then you got the lawyers and that whole sort of society of judge, lawyer, money, we can fix this. Māori need to be coming up with their own justice system on the marae. Get them home. And not all Māori can do that. You've got urban Māori that don't even know who their mum and dad are. But we have to be more forthcoming of taking ownership. We're only 17% of the population, around 800,000. And it's not too big a problem to deal with. And so I think that the challenge needs to be laid down to Māori. Well, what do you want to do here? Because, what's been happening ain't working.
You said 17%. Do you know the statistics for prison numbers, brown people?
Yeah,
so can you tell me that?
the numbers.
So how is the population of Maori and then the
so there's around 8,300 prisoners inside our 17 prisons at the moment, and you're looking between 55 and 60% are Maori. But if you crunch that down to 22 and down, you're talking 75%. So it's getting worse, not better. The young are offending more than the old. And so, message goes out. This system ain't working for Māori. And if it's not working for Māori, it's not working for the country.
I have a question about National's boot camp policy. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I would say that it's awesome if you want to create a more skilled criminal. Send them to boot camp and release them with all these trick skills, man. and in some ways, if we're going to sort of move towards a civil war, this is great for training them up. Awesome. I mean, yeah, it's like it's a reverse play by
That's crazy, eh?
Yeah, no, they smart.
Well, if you think about it, actually, that makes sense what you just said, because a lot of people who apply to be in the police, ex-military people, a lot of them are like kind of Nazi-ish kind of people, and that's why a lot of them end up in America specifically. I'm talking about America. That's why a lot of them target and violently hurt and kill black people. Like they're in those jobs to do that because they've been given the skills through their military experience, and unfortunately they've been roped into communities that are anti-black and anti-minority, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that, we don't want to be doomy and gloomy, and I think it's really important to keep it light on the show.
There are good police
But I used to
people.
joke about, there'll be a civil war in New Zealand. I used to just say that pretty much, with too much vodka in my belly. But the reality is, it's kind of feeling more like that's like I'm the great seer. It's like it's going to happen. But I often sit there and I'm where I live in Parnell, it's mainly a Pākehā neighbourhood. And I think if the Māori kids go to civil war against the Pākehā kids, they're going to smash them in about 24 hours. They think it's going to be, they'll just wipe them out, And so I don't care how good your weapons are, sort of. And so we don't want that. We absolutely don't want that, because that's all joking aside, that's the sort of thing is where the true, I've often said this election in 2023 will be the most divisive of all elections in our lifetime.
Well, it's happening in the world, right? So New Zealand will be a mirror of what's happening around the world.
Yeah, and we are a failure to ourselves as a country of less than 6 million, 5 million say, that happened on our watch. We're just a city on global standards, and we allowed ourselves to become divided, which makes us just monkeys. And so we've really got to be more vocal about, we don't want this. But at the same time, we've got to be forthcoming about how we see it.
Vaughan, you we don't have to tell your age unless you want to, but you've seen different things happening in Aotearoa, New Zealand, right? Different times, different movements. And racism, it's always present. It's unfucking believable how that jacket still suits, like a lot of people. However, would you say, is it possible to say that there used to be more or less, or it's just changing? Because I see a lot of old people saying, but it used to be much worse with the Springbok and all this thing, and now rugby, we're all inclusive, because it's always this thing of relating to something very fresh and cultural, strong, like rugby and all this stuff, now it's all about empowerment, used to be worse. And I'm like, is it true? Did it used to be worse, or now there's more makeup on racism?
Do you want to?
No, you start.
Because once I started, I'm not going to stop. But no, I think that the racism and the division, we're talking about it a lot more. It was always there. New Zealand always had that soft white underbelly, and you didn't really realise it until you tried as Māori to try and penetrate into areas that you didn't belong. It might be just the local Lions Club or the Rotary Club or the local government or whatever, and you look around and go, far out, who's the odd one out here? It's me. And so that has always been there, that you've not been part of the whole corridor. Now we're talking about it a lot more. And I think that, but I must admit that on a daily basis, I'm shocked by some of the shit that plays out of people's mouths. And I think, man, in 183 years, we haven't come forward. But we're actually able to have this corridor and not be shut down. And I think
killed.
that... Yeah, and or have the shit beaten out of you or whatever. But I think that, and this is just a generalisation, but I think the English colonial style is really good to say, hey, really nice corridor, and as soon as you turn your back, black bastard. So seriously, it's we have this thing about we keep our true thoughts to ourselves, and that is pretty rough what I've said. But when I hear other, particularly Australians or South Africans, they just say it. They say what they think, and it's like, oh, that's brutal, it's too much. Because I've been brought up where you hid your true feelings. You really did. And the way we did it was you just navigated yourself away or in and around where you didn't want to be. And so I think as a society, the racism has been constant, but we're very good at spotting it now. No, it's yeah.
And I think we're less tolerant as well, like of racism. Well, I feel like our generation, I have a lot of friends who come head to head with their parents and are constantly trying to educate their parents on like, actually that's kind of racist, or like use these opportunities to try and educate their parents on, like, say for instance, you know, this is just an example. I'm not saying this has happened to me, but you know, some Pākehā parents might be like, oh, you know, that shit that Māori get scholarships and stuff because, you know, like, what do we get? Or like, what do Asians get? And it's like, this isn't our land. Like, this is, I'm Filipino. My mum's from the Philippines. I wouldn't go to if I was Māori, I wouldn't go to the Philippines and be like, where's my scholarship? You know, if they have if they have scholarships for Filipinos in their own country. So it's kind of like that mentality where you've got to put things into perspective and educate yourself on why there's more financial support for particular ethnicities.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's what earlier on in our kōrero about a lot of the immigrants that came here, they might have had massive stories about persecution. You know, the Jews can go back 6,000 years. So when we say 183, you got to be kidding me. You know, but the reality is that when most of the immigrant groups arrived here, whether it's Croatian or Chinese or whatever, they just wanted to start again. Right? They weren't looking to fleece anybody of anything. So there was no beads or blankets deals or anything nasty going on. If we go back one step more into the colonial box, which was the doctrine of discovery, and the idea is that the way we grow our kingdom and our empire is getting shit off you at a really, really unfair price. That's the way we grow it, right? We really like all that sugar you've got in Fiji. We really like, and so those kauri trees to build our homes up in, you know, Washington or London or whatever. That's what we've come from. So Pākehā are not just, it's like Māori are not one group. You know, in many waka that came here. Pākehā are not one group either. And I think we've got to be a little more insightful to looking at how we got here. And but it is kind of shocking that it's very hard to have that kōrero where most people want you just to sweep it under the mat and forget about it. We're not going to forget about it. This ain't going away. And that's kind of what drives me, is that when someone implies, well, that wasn't me that did that to you. So therefore, let's just move on. Yeah. You can move on, but we ain't moving on. And you know, so, but at the same time, we want to get a resolution in what I would consider a classy manner. I think we've got to be smart because we need to work together. You know, we don't want any shit to go down in our society like a civil war, which we've talked about. That would just be a disaster.
Just going back to what you just said before about that, you know, that mentality of I didn't colonize you, like I didn't do anything. A lot of you, well, with that mentality, not you, but, you know, some people who say that stuff are benefiting from intergenerational wealth and privilege. And others are suffering from intergenerational trauma and still trying to figure out who they are, where they come from, and how they can reconcile the past and also build a better future for themselves and their whānau.
Yeah. Do you think that's one of the reasons why so many people opposed the Ministry of Education wanting to implement more Maori history, because people actually don't want those versions, those stories to be told? Is that a connection with education? Because as you said, it becomes a thing of like how aware you are of your situation. When you acknowledge your privilege, when you know what's going on, it's easier to understand things. You become more empathetic, right? You understand
and more
what's
at peace with yourself.
At peace with yourself.
And where you sit in that kōrero as well.
So we actually go back to education, right?
It is. It's that uncomfortable truth, to steal an Al Gore line. But, you know, when you read a lot of our history books and you look at who wrote them, and a lot of the stuff is mainly written by Pākehā researchers, right? And so, like, who are you really writing this for, and who funded you to write this book or whatever? But, you know, I've made comments on social media, and people go, oh, but you Māori, you came here and you ate all the moriori, so you're not the real Indigenous. And I'm thinking, you keep that shit up and I'm going to eat you. You know, it's like, because that's just such a dumb thing to say, you know? Yeah.
Carnivore, all right. Avon.
Pass the salt.
Speaking of carnivore, man.
Carnivore diet, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because again, for me, that's one of the reasons why I'm still working at the school. I really enjoy to pay attention to what's going on, like to how kids respond to things, you know.
Yeah.
Like I do this now it's getting old, but you know, like I always do that. How is school going? And as soon as I say that, I say, don't say boring.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, like they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on. There must be something going on. But like, it's so first thing for them to say it's boring, because of course it is. As you were saying, everything is changing. Technology is evolving. If you look at a telephone from years ago, it looks like this huge box, and then you look like a telephone. It's not even a telephone anymore. You know, like the last thing that you do is actually calling someone, but it's this amazing tool that does everything. But you look at the model of a classroom, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I don't give shits to them when they say it's boring. I try to say, can you flip that and find the good bits? We know the boring bits, and we all know that we have to go through this, you know, like it's something that we hope that it's going to change, but like, how are we going to make the situation better for ourselves? Because that's life, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you know, in terms of full respect to you as a teacher, because a kid can go home and jump onto version 4 of ChatGPT and come back with a better answer than you're ever going to give them. So you're on the hot plate in terms of, back in my day, you just believe what the teacher told you, right? Sort of thing. He's bigger than me and he sounds pretty smart, so you swallowed all of that. But now what they're doing off campus or off the school premises is potentially so. Therefore, and you know, how many teachers in New Zealand would be sitting on a show like this tonight? And no disrespect to all of it, but it's almost a thankless task where if I think back, I had some cool teachers. I can remember their names, and they were just awesome because they really believed in you. They actually looked at you like, hey, you know, I know you're the bottom of the class and you come across as a bit of a meathead, but I think you've got potential.
Yeah.
You know, that dude that actually believed in you. That's that whole, and I think that that one of the things about society is what we've lost is that true connection to those personal values, and you know, ultimately, like for example, for me, you know, things like, you know, courage and gratitude and but ultimately the most sophisticated society is unconditional love. You know, it's that ability to, as humans, is like, if we don't get it right this time, well, I'm coming back until I get that right. You know, and I think that's what we're in it right now is we listen to our 120 politicians down there and I'm not feeling it in the puku. It's not there. And I think that's the renaissance that's going on. We're challenging that vibe. But just unfortunately, we go into this election with we've got to pick the best of a bad bunch.
Do you think I like that the perspective that you put in there, but how do we do it? It feels like the big movements, they came from revolutions, from people rebelling, or for like very good organizational skills of leaders from the people saying we're stronger. There's no doubt we got the power. People got the power, but you need the leaders or whoever it is at the forefront to organize the mass.
Yeah.
Is it easier to organize the mass, or it's easier to burn cars and go like France and just get
Well, and this is where, you know, V is for Vaughan, but it's also who down there is given the vision, right? What does New Zealand look like? And so we're going to rock along to the polls and we're going to be led to believe that, hey, this government, wasteful spending, billions, we're going broke, we're going to be like the next Venezuela, so therefore give it to this government because they're going to be more prudent and careful. Is that our will?
Are you giving shit to media now? I would love that subject. Can we go there?
Yeah. and this is it. But I can't think of anybody that's actually painting a picture for me where I go, that's my man or that's my girl. You know, I love that picture. So those movements that come through are generally based on seeing something that's better. It sounds a bit Pied Piperish, but I can tell you right now, I'm turning up to the election in October and it looks like I'll be voting through gritted teeth. You know, it's like, yeah, it's this lot's, you know, more. It's more exciting watching paint dry at the moment.
I just want to highlight how great that V is for Vaughan, but also vision. So when you're standing for local or central government, put that in your pocket as your slogan.
And you'll be in the crowd and go, but tell us your vision.
Yeah.
Great. I joked about the media, but we all know that it plays a big part in the game, because at the end of the day, it's much more about wealth and power than actually leadership I don't know. I could wake up with my mouth full of ants tomorrow, but the way that I see it is that whoever got the money, the banks who got more power, will have a bit more influence on what we're getting. So are the politicians the ones to be blamed that hard, Vaughan, or we can look at the other side of the spectrum and pay attention to who is giving all the news and printing all the newspapers for us?
I think that in terms of the media, it's a bit of a beat up, because you hear it all the time. Oh, well, stuff, they're on the payroll, they got the money, so therefore anything pro-government's going to come out of stuff. But the reality is, if you really look at the other side of it, it's going back to this old-fashioned left versus right, in terms of, that's pro-them, and there's this switch off, which is complete rubbish. So therefore, the skill that we probably don't have as a society to question what we're reading more and challenge that. So how do we form our opinions? Because most people don't have enough hours in the day to listen to something like this and then bounce to another, right? So they're hoping that they tune into someone that just kind of like can cut through that bullshit. I mean, I honestly don't read papers. I don't watch TV. You just make it up as you go along, because you just get to that point where you go, well, I know what you're going to write, very opinion-based.
Apart from V's for Vaughan, but also for Vision, who else out there you guys would recommend? Like, who do you listen to? Are there people actually breaking down news and making things accessible for the audience, for the big mass?
Well, there's this podcast called ALTBAYS, and
he's awake, man.
1-0 to you.
Thank you. I don't know. I feel like you got it right there, Vaughan. You got it right. People don't have time.
No. They don't. Yep. They don't. And so in terms of true leadership at a community level, what we have to, if our value set is solid, right? Our values are solid, we're not going to talk shit. We really aren't. We're going to call it straight. And so, for me, number one value for me is courage. It's never to be scared of saying what you really think. So therefore, you can't be on someone else's payroll. If you're look what happened to Rob Campbell a couple of months ago. Says what he thought, out of there. Right?
Do you know who Rob Campbell is?
No. Who is Rob Campbell?
So he was head of the health authority, Whataora, and he put his views online about Three Waters policy that National commented on, and next minute he's gone because he became politicised as a bureaucrat. Sorry, to me,
because he would influence people's opinions. Is that the main reason?
Well, I
think cannot have an opinion.
The number one rule when you're a bureaucrat is to be apolitical. So he just crossed the line. Now my feeling is that when he crossed the line, he'd probably had people that were looking to deal with him anyway, and this was the perfect opportunity. So, because we down on the street, the Great Unwashed, don't know this type of stuff. But coming back to the secret of this sort of stuff is respecting your creative license to think what you're going to say, but don't be scared to get it wrong, because we want to be challenged, right? And go, you know what, Vaughan, and then be prepared to placate and come back and go, and that's a healthy society versus because you're sitting over there, I'll never agree with you. And everything you do, I'm going to chop it down. And that's the world that we're in right now. And that's why, as an advanced breed of monkeys, we're just failing to evolve in a way that we should do. And so for me, I'm hanging my hopes on the young coming through. Because whilst they may not ever own a home and they'll be carrying debt, they ain't stupid, man. Because they're not going down the boring old line that we're going down, which is you work really hard, you get your mortgage-free home, and you go into a rest home. what sort of life is that? It's like our goals have to be far better and more evolved as a society than that. And so, one of the biggest industries in New Zealand is just the rest home industry, which is really just a departure room. It's just a place where people go to, it's dead people who are still breathing. Right, and they keep them in their beds long enough to charge it out at $1,200 a week because, mate, that is, it's battery farming for old people, and so to me,
the longer you keep them alive, the more money they can make.
Big time. That's not my goal. That's not my goal, and I'll be the last person to say, well, end of life, but I want to die dignified.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
Ooh, that's powerful. Did you want to say something? Sorry, you were. Please.
I can't remember. I always get these like, and then by the time it's my turn, I'm like,
I'm the one that's meant to forget stuff. I'm the 60-year-old. That's another thing I'm meant to go. I can't remember what I said 5 minutes ago.
Yes, I am a relatively new mum, so my brain.
So I got something for you, Elvisa, and you can start, and then we just this is good and it's prolific, but
get it.
I think we're close to wrapping it up, but I just want to change a little bit the subject so we can get some new ideas because we agreed a lot. I like this, but let's change a little bit the perspective. We talk a lot about freedom of speech nowadays.
Yeah.
Freedom. Oh, my freedom. Where is my freedom? Where does it start? Where does your freedom start? Where does the freedom of the other one start? Like how do you both of you see this thing with like these requirements, this thing of like fighting for my freedom of speech and with all these platforms? Where are we going with all of this?
That is a big question.
Big question. Let's put some fire in there.
Yeah, so we've got laws around freedom of speech and hate speech, right? People are mixing them up a lot and not realizing that there's a difference and that there are laws around it as well. And that bleeds into the online space. And then when people get followed up by the police, they're like, I was just practicing my freedom of speech. It's like, well, actually, you were inciting violence towards a particular demographic, and that has real world consequences, as we have seen.
Yeah.
So, I think there needs to be more education and around the laws, but also maybe like some self-awareness. And maybe, I don't know. I just like, I know that within, say, the freedom of speech movement, there is also a spectrum of people who identify within that group. There are people who literally are there because they want to feel safe having conversations openly. And then there's the extremists who want to say whatever they want and not get any consequences from that, even though it has really bad impacts, So it's important to understand that there, again, within that community, there is a spectrum of people at either end, who are more relatively, what do I say? Sensible, I guess.
And in terms of the 8 billion odd humans that are on the planet and freedom of speech, freedom of speech coming out of the mouth of a dumb animal is not going to be great, right? But when moral reasoning is applied and there's a thought process, so therefore it's respecting the power that you have to speak freely. And so I think that we're in a world where you hear stuff that's just crazy, it's whether it's supremacist or whatever, and you go, you know what, that's just, you shouldn't be allowed to say that. But in my world, nothing that you can say could hurt me, because it's up to me how I respond to that. We're in a world now where that response is being managed before you get the opportunity to respond to it. And so I'm more on the side of go hard, say what you want to say, because if you talked like your head had 2 kilo of mince inside it, well, that's up to me whether I listen and I just move on. But freedom of speech for someone like us, that we're sitting in Whitianga and we're talking to our audience, versus someone who's in a position of actually influencing, they're in a position of power and authority, then it's completely different. And that's why, I rejected David Seymour's crime comments, because he would not know what the inside of a prison looks like. I think that's abuse of freedom of speech.
Yes, but there's also, like, you've got people who, I can't remember the guy's name because brain, but the guy who's like put something in the water and turned the frogs gay. That guy.
Yeah.
He got prosecuted because he was practicing his freedom of speech, and his freedom of speech involved creating a conspiracy around not Columbine shootings, but it was a school shooting.
Yeah.
And because of what he was saying, and he was repeating these messages, it caused the families of the deceased children to suffer because people were saying, you're making up these lies about your children being killed. That's awful. And they ended up prosecuting him or something like that. And God, I can't remember his name, and he's so famous. But he was practicing his freedom. He kept saying, "Oh, it's my freedom of speech. I can do this. This is my job." Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But what he was doing, he was just like buying in all these viewers and listeners, and he was just appealing to what they wanted to believe as well. So there's a difference between you have your views on David Seymour because you are educated and you can think critically.
Yeah.
So many people who use media do not have media education or literacy. You know, media literacy really needs to be a key part of this new generation coming through, but also older generations. Like, how do we get people thinking critically about what they're consuming and what they're exposed to online? Because freedom of speech is so not rampant, but like the social media has taken away agency from government, whereas historically what we saw on TV and heard on the radio, we were very limited on what kind of content and messages we consumed. Now the internet is just like anything. It could be a robot, you know?
And then if you have someone so powerful like Elon Musk, for example, who have money to buy one of those platforms, suddenly he is the one telling us what to get. Yeah. Right? So I that worries me a little bit as well. I always pay attention to how things are moving. Yeah. How much power interferes on which message is going to the population as well.
And I'm glad you sort of threw Elon in there, because that's the world that we've moved to, where there's a very small group that have an incredible amount of influence over our planet, and then there's the rest of us that are kind of like going along for the ride. And so, you know, it's not difficult to say something outrageous on social media and find your account's disabled or whatever, and you kind of look at it and go, what? You know, and I think that from our perspective, freedom of speech still needs dumb people or influenceable people or people that are not able to form their own conclusions to follow. So you're only as good as people that are going to swallow that stuff. And I think that for me, I've got no fears about people saying the craziest stuff. It's about a society that can think for itself. And I think that's where I'm worried about it now, when you look at the really what you would call almost banal level of offering that we've got in politics, and we're going to go and vote for these people to run our country for the next 3 years. That there, in terms of my freedom of speech, is, well, my freedom was actually quite narrow. My options were, do I want bad or bad? You know, sort of thing. It was like, you know, this is really like a motley crew that we're choosing from. And that's not to knock, you know, the political situation right now, but it's true. I mean, it's just true. We've got, you know, a really motley crew to choose from. So, you know, we come back to that kōrero we had early on around, it's going to be up to us to be forthcoming. You know, we just can't look to Wellington and go that there's 120 politicians down there that are making a difference. 80% of them are just a paid gig. You know, they don't turn up to the house when they should. So probably there's 20 of them that are running the country. And we just need to do better than that. I reckon the country could be run by about 10 people, to be honest. Well, look at what's going on down there. 10 good ones. Yeah.
Wow. We covered so much that was so dynamic. I love this.
I haven't finished yet. I'm just warming up. I just done my stretches.
I know.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. My vocal cords. I'm just ready. Yeah, I thought this was just the warm up.
we can do a series with Vaughan. I love it. Oh, you're definitely coming back to Fix Younger, man. Don't worry about that. We'll fly you next time, so you don't have to go through all the windy roads. But
well, that's unless I get chucked in prison when I get back. You know, we'll be waiting for me at the Bombays. That is it. Yeah.
Man, I wanted to finish with something positive. The work that you're doing in the prisons. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, like how you got into that, and what do you see there that you wish more people could see?
Yeah, well, the first trigger is I had the opportunity to go inside a prison a few years ago with a business I was working with that was working in the Mangaroa prison, which is in the Hawke's Bay. And I remember going inside that prison and looking at these boys and going, they could be my sons. And so that really sort of like stuck with me. They go, I have my boys at home, they're safe, they're sound, they've got good jobs and that, so it's not them. However, I couldn't get them out of my mind. They get leaving them behind. I felt almost like a traitor or something, just walking away from thinking, okay, block that out. So coming forward to, I just decided I wanted to work in the prisons, and through my network have had the opportunity to deal with corrections at the top level. And we want to first focus on a Maori tikanga program, which is a healing process that will reintegrate, but it's not only for, we just believe that if we get it right for Māori, everybody is welcome, because it's up to us to be forthcoming. We've got to lead on this. And so that healing, and I think that I talked about it before we started here, I call it post-conviction persecution. So you go and do your 2 years and you think, right, I'm out, I'm going to start again. You go and try and get a flat. Landlord doesn't want you because you've been inside. You can't try and get a car. You're not going to get finance. No finance comes. What do you say? You end up getting your car through a loan shark and paying 30% interest, insurance, and one thing after another. The barriers are there where no wonder reoffending's a problem, because society looks at you of like, you are a criminal, not for your 2-year sentence, for the rest of your life. We've got to change society. And so we've all talked about the 8,300 that are in prison. There are some there. There's no end of rehabilitation that will not resolve that. That's like, it's above everybody's pay grade. We just have to accept that. That's life. But there is the reality of, is it 3,000 or is it 4,000 of the 8,000 that we know we want to give our best crack of getting back and being contributing to the New Zealand society, to our communities, and have a correction system that don't. We seem to compare ourselves to the rest of the world. They're doing it like this in the Netherlands. They're doing it like that. We need to do it our way. And so, so that's my passion. So I'm hopeful that, I've said to my son the other night, we were at dinner on Sunday night, and I said, what will make me so happy is you bump into a young man in the street and he goes, I met your dad and he was in the prisons and I got a job. So you've actually got that successful pathway, and that I'd do that for free. That's my goal, and it's not all about me. I think more of us have to think that way. That just not, they're inside this big concrete box, and it's a factory. That prisons are just factories, and
it's a business, right? Because there's money.
Oh, Leo, you nailed it. It is a billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry that's trading very, very well on the misery of my people. There are people that have very successful businesses keeping prisons going, whether it's cleaning the toilets or putting the tissues in the whatever, the kitchens or whatever. It's a game. Prisons are a massive industry. And so let's not forget that people do very, very well out of corrections. And, I guess that my success story is, I hope they go broke, on my watch, because we're getting people out. The reality is, you still need prisons. Yeah. And so, in terms of the 110 grand a year or whatever it costs to keep a prisoner inside.
How much did you say? I'm sorry?
About 110 a year to keep a prisoner inside.
110 grand. $110,000.
It's hard to get that money as a salary, isn't it? Like,
want
to get the money, right?
But for your audience out there, you jump on a calculator and you times 110,000 times 8,300. Then you look at the 2,500 that are in the community with a bracelet on their ankle, and the probation's officers are looking after them. We're talking billions and billions. Yeah, and so it's not about saving money, but you're just looking and go, I think we could do this better.
We can do better. Eh?
We can do better. So that's all it is, and it might sound a little bit romantic, but I'd rather not just turn a blind eye to it. I drive past the Mount Eden prison, which is a remand prison. It's near my neighbourhood every day, and when I look at that and go, there's humans in there, and when they're released, they're not better off for the experience. They're not coming out and going, I'm healed and here I am, I'm ready. It's almost like head down, loss of mana, and we're doing that, not just to Māori, to everybody leaving those prisons, yeah.
Wow. Do you want to add something to that, please, Elvisa?
Which parties do you think are most likely, if likely at all, to invest in more rehabilitation programs like the one that you work with, because obviously it's not just Māori in prisons. There are other types of ethnicities there. But I'm sure that they could benefit also from tikanga and learning the ways of te ao Māori. So which parties do you think might be better?
Okay.
Yeah. For
No,
that
no.
kind
Quick.
of stuff?
So in terms of the current situation, Labor are trying. I think their outcomes are questionable, but they are trying. Māori and Green. To be fair, Chloe Swarbrick is the only MP I've heard talk about a serious reinvention of the prison system.
Shout out, Chloe.
No, seriously, she is the only one.
People.
Māori Party have a vested interest because over half of everyone in there are their own.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So Māori and Green. So therefore, if we want to, look after our mohere, our prisoners on the inside, that's the way to go. 100% not ACT or National. They don't have a rehabilitation bone in their bodies unless you consider boot camps rehabilitation, right?
Yeah.
And so that, end of story.
Or supercharging those activities.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, finishing on that glum note.
No, there's hope, but it's I guess the key message is vote. Educate yourself and vote.
Yeah.
And don't just vote what your parents tell you to vote for. Don't be a loyalist voter.
Yeah.
Be an educated, informed voter.
And you've just to finish, because this will be my last word. I'll shut my trap after this one. But you useless bloody Māori out there, you've got to get off your ass and vote, because the average turnout at general elections is about 80%. Māori, 37%. Because you know what happens is people say, who are you going to vote for? Yeah, I'm going to vote for Māori Party or Labour or whatever. And then, was there an election? Sort of thing. We just forget about it. So, the 600,000 Māori that are on the general or the Māori roll, they have a shitty turnout record. And so this election is one that they can't afford to stay home and watch the Warriors while the election's going on, sort of thing. So, yeah.
I have a tip for that as well, for those who are really bad at time management.
Get the Warriors to
Like
wear
myself.
T-shirts.
No, make it an event. Put it in your diary, invite your friends and your whānau and say, this day we are going to the ballots.
Yeah.
We are dedicating this day to voting.
Yeah.
And we're going to go together and we're going to vote however we vote, and then we'll have fish and chips after or something like that. Make it a thing.
Drink
that's a
after,
brilliant idea.
not before.
Brilliant idea.
Drink after.
Yeah.
Drink after the event.
We don't want drunk voters.
Yes. It's the only event that you drink after the event.
Nice.
Team, what a cool kōrero. I'm so happy with this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vaughan.
I've so enjoyed this. Yeah, I'm not leaving Whitianga. I'm here.
Nice, man. Well, the idea of our show, I know that you pay attention to what we're doing, and I really appreciate you liking our posts and those stories and being part of it. Everyone who comes to the ALTBAYS Show becomes part of our funnel.
Yeah.
That's what we're going for. So Elvisa came as a guest, and look where she is now. It's
awesome.
The second show that she co-hosts, so you will definitely get a call to come back and join us again, man. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for educating us and to inform us and to provoke as well, because that's the thing for us here at ALTBAYS. We don't have to agree with everything, but we can still have a laugh. We can still learn from each other and see, what things we're doing, they're good, and maybe we could improve a little bit here or there. And I'm sure we're all leaving this place with some fresh thoughts.
You three were awesome. Seriously, I've just so loved it. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vaughan. Kia ora. Elvisa, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Kia ora.
Papa. Woo, woo, woo. And for you guys watching us at home, thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It really helps the platform. See you on Thursday, 7 p.m. Peace.
Boom.
Kapai.